Well, greetings, Ben, and welcome to another episode of our WCN Fluencer podcast. It is great to visit with you today.
It's great to be here. Really appreciate the invite.
You know, I'm very lucky that I get the opportunity to visit with folks, all over the country that are innovators, influencers. And when we met just a couple of weeks ago, I said, I need to know more about Joe and Bella. So this is our opportunity to really dig deep into not only your why, but these terrific products that Joe and Bella has developed. So welcome.
Thanks. And absolutely excited to talk about all things Joe and Bella.
So tell me about this adaptive clothing. I mean, it's something that I know is important, but something that I don't know anything about. And I would imagine our listeners want to know.
You know, it's interesting. I didn't know about adaptive clothing until I really needed to know about it from my grandmother. And I know that's typical for a lot of things when it comes to caregiving. We're not really studying up on caregiving products unless you need it that
sure.
day.
Unless you're in the middle of a crisis.
Exactly. And in one sense, that's kind of what happened with us. My grandparents were living in a memory care community. My grandfather passed about 7-8 years ago. So my grandmother was alone at this time, super sharp. My grandfather had Parkinson's and dementia. So my grandmother moved in with him and had major mobility issues. She was in a wheelchair for most of the day. Had issues with her shoulders and elbows, and really didn't like working on improving her movement. And so she started kind of physically declining a little quick. And when the pandemic hit, like so many people who had loved ones in care communities, we lost that connection, that physical connection with her. We couldn't physically go and see her, and we also struggled to communicate with her in many other ways. The professional caregivers helped us talk to her on the phone. My grandma had her own phone, but around this time, she really struggled to talk on the phone. Caregivers tried to set up a FaceTime, and that didn't work. We tried drive-bys, and that didn't work. And it was a weird time for our family. My father, as it was probably for everybody in this country. But my father and his dog had visited my grandmother every single day since she moved in. And so that first day, and then became weeks after, of not being there with her emotionally was a challenge. But we learned practically it was a challenge too. As a family caregiver, we wanted to make sure she was comfortable and taken care of, and had everything she needed. And we didn't know what she needed. And, there was only so much, we could kind of pry out of those professional caregivers who at this point were short-staffed and pre-vaccine times, literally risking their lives every day to go there. So the last thing we want to do was bug them anymore. And so what we did was we put a little video tablet in her room that we could essentially drop in on, see how life was for her. And we saw one of these moments. It was just a coincidental moment when our whole family was together, and let's see what grandma's doing. And we were watching a professional caregiver who was putting a cardigan on her. And, my grandmother was sitting in a wheelchair, and it was the first time I ever heard her swear. She dropped a big old F-bomb. I didn't even know she knew that word.
F-bomb.
It was a moment where our whole family were kind of shocked at what we were seeing and hearing. And she did it because she was in a lot of pain getting that cardigan on.
Right.
And it's a cardigan, that's stretchy material, it's oversized. And that caregiver was trying so carefully just to drape it around her shoulders and get her second arm in. And it was horribly painful for her. We felt terrible, not just for my grandmother, but that caregiver who was trying so hard to not make this a difficult process. And we realized that this is something they have to do at least twice a day, every day. And we were watching the easiest garment of her, of her dressing experience to be put on. So couldn't imagine how challenging that is for a daily routine to go through that much pain multiple times a day, the indignity of it, the time it took to do
Mhm.
this. So what we did, we hung up the phone. We're like, all right, we got to figure something out here. This isn't working. And Googled things like clothes for old people, clothes for people in wheelchairs, clothes for memory care. And we finally stumbled upon this word called adaptive clothing, which we didn't know about. And so we found clothes that are called adaptive, which meant that they were modified in some sort of way to make dressing easier. We realized right away we actually did know what these clothes were, just not the term. I had shoulder surgery a couple years earlier and went on Etsy and bought a tank top that had some Velcro around one of the straps, so I can just undo it without moving my arm.
Ah,
And
yeah.
that saved me from having to live in a robe essentially for like 2-3 weeks there. But I didn't know what it was called. I just called it, I think, shoulder surgery shirt. I think it's what it was
Sure,
described
sure.
on Etsy.
Right.
So anyway, so we found a bunch of clothes for my grandma that had openings and ways that would make it easier for her to put on. Sent her a bunch of stuff. And we're like, cool, problem solved. What's next on the list here? And we checked in when we saw the package arrived. Checked in on that tablet, and we're like, exciting to see that she's going to be wearing all these new clothes, and she's not wearing any of it. And so we're talking to her through this tablet, and we're asking my grandma, what's up? Why aren't you wearing any of these new clothes? And she just looked at us and went, they're all too ugly. And they were. We hoped that she wouldn't have thought so. Some of them were cheaply made. We can tell they weren't the type of clothes she has worn her whole life. And for her, that was more important, to be able to wear the clothes that she felt comfortable wearing,
Right.
that had her look how she wanted to look. That was more important than getting clothes that were less painful. She would rather endure that pain and be able to look how she wanted to look. And it was heartbreaking in a way, that
Yeah.
she's willing to put up with that kind of pain, for this kind of end goal, to be able to identify and look a certain way. And so we looked for more clothes that would be less ugly for her. Tried some others, sent some more, didn't work.
Right.
And this was really where the idea of Joe and Bella came from. We wanted to make clothes that are functional, that work right for aging bodies, for people that are living with changes related to incontinence or mobility or cognition, but also look like the clothes they've been wearing their whole lives and the clothes they want to continue wearing. And so in the past year, Joe and Bella has been around for about a year and a half. We first did a much deeper dig around the country to find some adaptive clothes that do exist that are good looking. So up on our site right now are some clothes from other brands that we think are pretty good. There's some great shoes and slippers, some adaptive undergarments that really do make dressing easier and simpler. And that gave us some time to develop our own product. And so one of the most popular clothing items that was on our site originally is a pair of adaptive pants called carezips. Carezips were invented by a woman outside of Georgia named Molly Dye, who was caring for her mother who had dementia. She one day saw a caregiver change her mother's adult briefs and pants while her mother was lying on a bed, and really kind of had to be pushed and rolled over because her mother couldn't help getting her dressed. And she was shocked at how undignified and miserable that looked. And that led her on her journey to create carezips. Carezips sold out on our site, sold out nationally. And we have now been working with Molly to redesign, update, upgrade carezips really for a new era. So carezips by Joe and Bella is our first product that is now live on our site for sale. It's available there in some 3 awesome colors at joeandbella.com. We found a great design team to help us update and upgrade these. And, and I don't say fortunately, because it's not a fortunately, but it's a nice coincidence that the lead designer is currently caring for her grandmother who has dementia and Alzheimer's. So this has become a passion project.
Makes a big difference. These 3 groups it does make a difference.
It really does. Yeah. And she's also really talented, which is also fantastic. She actually is was the lead designer for the initial product launch at Lululemon, as well as the hospital scrubs brand Figs. So if you know any sort of cool doctors and nurses, they're probably wearing Figs. And we've now used a new fabric. It's much more breathable. It's much more fashionable. It's fixed the fit, so it's a much more kind of tapered fit down the leg. CareZips has 3 zippers to it. 2 of the zippers on the outside. They go from the hip to around the knee. It's got a snap. It's really easy to use at the hip. And the zipper's got a very long pull tab that's easy to grab. And then the 3rd zipper is internal, that goes from the inside of a knee, up through the crotch area to the inside of the other knee. And so that makes it easier to fully open the pants. Yes. It also gives you quick, easy access.
That is ingenious.
It is. And, Molly with the original CareZips came up with that 3rd zipper and actually even got a patent on it. So as of now, we're the only pair of pants out there with that 3rd zipper, which also makes it unique. But what's really cool about these pants are, if you take the 3 zippers away, it looks like something you can go grab at a Lululemon, at a Chico's. They look just like a really nice pair of comfortable pants that just happen to have a few adaptations to them to make dressing easier. So they're really perfect for anybody that spends time in a wheelchair, that uses incontinence products, needs help toileting, that needs help getting dressed. And we're coming out in a month or 2 with a CareZips Luxe version that's going to have some extra features, some extra pockets, an upgraded upgraded fabric. And then we have 6 other products that'll be coming out by the end of the year. Chinos for men and women, a button down and a polo for guys, and then a cardigan and a blouse for women. So that's really kind of our journey, where we've come from and where we're going. And, for us, it was, something that started as, making life easier for our grandmother, and somehow morphed us into a full-time job. And that sort of transition happened really, seamless in a sense. Like, we didn't set out to say, let's start a business in this space. We just kind of started doing something because we wanted to find a solution that wasn't there. And, our family has been, we were dedicated caregivers to my grandmother. She passed in December 21, which was, out of pandemic lockdown, but still in that weird middle time pre-vaccine. So it was, a kind of a hybrid in-person Zoom funeral. But it was still that kind of that weird moment. My dad was able to go into the care community and see her and say goodbye, and was able to FaceTime all of us. And so really what we're doing now is really honoring her legacy, as one of the most fashionable people I ever knew. And she would have been so proud to see how these pants turned out. So we're excited for where this is going and what we've done so far.
So, that day that she dropped the F-bomb, that really changed everything.
It really did. And it was in such an unexpected way. It really was just like a moment where we were just trying to make life a little better for her. And realize, like, oh no, like she's not in a unique position here. She's not the only one that struggles with this. We spent so much, I spent a whole lot of time visiting her. And so I knew all the residents, and her neighbors, and like, oh my gosh, all these people would benefit from pants like this. All these caregivers who work here, it would benefit from this. And so, we're really excited to be on such a kind of a mission driven journey. And so that's why, we've been still working with my grandmother's old care community. Actually, her executive director is even on our board of advisors still, and has been.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, when we get prototypes, we send them to her, and she tries them out. She'll wear them on her own, which is great, and then she'll have some residents try them out, which is also, of course, really great. And she'll hand them to her professional caregivers and say, "No instructions, just figure out how to use them. Are they easy enough to use?" And so it's been really exciting to be able to stay with that community and still work with all the folks over there as well.
I know my listeners have both on Healing Ties and here on the Fluencer podcast, they've heard me say this many times, but it just continues to hold true. The best innovators are people like yourself who have been in the trenches and see a need and can figure out how to make that happen. And the legacy that you're creating with Joe and Bella for your grandmother is just, it has so much meaning to it. Because when you get right down to it, Ben, there's no strangers when it comes to caregivers. While we may not know each other personally, we understand the stories. Yep. And we understand where we've been and how we're trying to help others.
That's for sure. And one of the great things about this job, and I've been spending, as you mentioned, a lot of time on the marketing side, and that's allowed me to talk to a whole lot of people in the space who've been doing things in the space for a lot longer than I have, from professional caregivers, dementia coaches, senior living consultants, social gerontologists, professors of psychology for the aging, and a whole lot of former family caregivers. And so many people in the space are in it for the right reason, came into it for the right reason. And so many stay in it, even when their own personal caregiving journey is over. And so, I think we've got at Joe and Bella, and my family, we've got an interesting story of how we joined, but it's far from unique, which I think also makes it just as powerful. That so many people who become caregivers to their family, when that personal journey is over, want to continue contributing in this space. As I mentioned kind of at the beginning of our talk, no one's really going to be an expert on caregiving until you have to be one. And usually you become that a few days too late.
So true.
You've got to usually, right. Most of us are coming in here under, circumstances of urgency. And I think it's really important for those who finally do collect all of this knowledge and experience to continue sharing it in ways that are easily accessible, for people who are often going through a life-changing experience for themselves and their family.
Right. Because caregiving happens because of one or two things. An untimely diagnosis or an unfortunate accident, and suddenly you're thrust into this role. And most people, most people aren't well versed in dealing with the social service issues, the legal issues, the medical issues. You're thrown into this, and love can only get you so far. And being able to tap into a variety of resources and people who have been in the trenches is so important.
That's for sure. And it's as you're talking about that, I'm just thinking through the first moment when my grandparents moved into a care community. It was under the most urgent of circumstances. It was the eve of Christmas Eve when after my grandmother had fallen out of her bed one too many times, even with 24-hour caregiver help. And paramedics pretty much said, You guys got to stop calling 911. Got to figure something out. And, we moved in, and it was a really tough night because it was a skeleton staff. Everything's decorated with holiday cheer, and none of us were particularly cheery at the moment.
Cheerful.
It was, and
Right.
we were given a tour by one of the two staff members who I think were in the building at the time. And while we're getting a tour, first, my grandfather was not particularly happy to move there. But then we went to the kitchen and he saw bacon's on the menu and that he can have it every day. Done. So he was it. So he was sold. That did it for him. And
yeah, it kind of proves the point. The best way to somebody's heart is through their stomach.
Exactly.
So.
And while we're on this tour, a couple who you can tell lived at this community kind of joined the tour and were following us along, and eventually it started leading the tour. That was Joe and Bella, who are widowed Holocaust survivors who met each other later in life. They met each other at this community, eventually moved into the same room together, and remained together until Joe passed about 4 or 5 years ago. And they eventually became my grandparents' best friends. They ate every meal together. My grandmother was also not particularly excited to move there. I know she looked at me and goes, "You expect me to hang out with all these old ladies?" She was 90. And Joe and Bella started coming to our house for all of our major holidays and milestones, and really became my set of adopted grandparents. And so we're doing this to honor my grandparents, but we're doing this also to honor Joe and Bella and all they did for my grandparents. Bella just passed just a couple months ago. She was in her late 90s, so she had a long, vibrant life. But she was able to see the beginnings of Joe and Bella, the company, which is really exciting.
Oh goodness, what a wonderful story! So it just kind of proves the point. It's through story sharing where diversity meets the road to collaborate on a common cause. And by sharing this wonderful story, it just connects. It not only connects your why, it just gives you the mission to move forward. I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but it's got to be very satisfying.
It's equally satisfying and terrifying at the same time, because we have a lot of pressure to not screw this opportunity up. And so we've set really high expectations for ourselves. We said, if we're going to really do this, we got to do it right. We're going to be, smart and really thoughtful with how to develop a product, how we're going to present it, what we're going to be as a brand, what our tone is going to be. And so, it took a lot of, for starting any business, of course, it takes a whole lot of work, but we felt kind of this extra level of emotional pressure to live up to the expectations, to fully honor those who have kind of inspired us to do what we're doing. The last thing we want to do is make clothes that are too ugly for my grandma. So we were like, we got to do it. And the funny thing is, like, as picky as my grandma was, Bella might have been worse. My mom spent, I would say, a good half decade trying to find Bella a new pair of shoes. And Bella was, for a few of those years, my mom would pick up Bella and they would go to a shoe store. And, she would sit there and really inspect the shoes and reject them every time. And eventually my mom would just bring boxes of shoes to her apartment to show her. And she was a hard person to please with clothing and apparel. So we're keeping that in mind as we do this. I'm like, well, would Bella wear this? Would she like this? Would my grandma wear this? Now we'll know.
Yeah, you'll know. You'll know by that reflection. That's oh, goodness. Well, Ben, we could talk for hours, and I would love to do that. And maybe we should do a few more of these. But please let all of our listeners know how they can learn more about Joe and Bella CareZips and
definitely, yeah, you can find all about Joe and Bella at our website, www.joeandbella.com. If anyone has any specific questions or they'd like to reach out to me, they can always contact me at my email, which is just ben@joeandbella.com. Check out our Instagram. We got some new photos up there from our photo shoot out in LA a few weeks ago, showing off the pants. Our Instagram handle is shop Joe and Bella. A high school couple has the Instagram handle of Joe and Bella, so we weren't able to get it. So we had to pivot a little there, which is great.
Those darn high schoolers.
Yeah, in terms of my background, I'm in the rest of the Joe and Bella company for the most part is based here in Chicago. Most of us are in the suburbs. I live in the city with my partner Nate and our golden retriever Maisie.
There we go.
Sleeping over here right next to me. It was a little too humid out there for her today, so she's exhausted after her 20-minute walk.
I know Chicago well.
Oh, there you
being
go.
From St. Louis, lots of trips to Chicago. Yeah. But goodness, Ben, with the great work that you're doing and the products at Joe and Bella, what you're creating, you are certainly a WC influencer, and I can't thank you enough.
Thank
for
you. This has been
today.
great. Appreciate it.